Hi everyone, and welcome back to part 2 of our assertiveness workshop series. Today in part 2, we're going to be looking at types of communication styles and how we might define these. So just to start with a quick recap on what we were looking at in our last video. We started off by having a little look at what CBT is and how we might define this. We looked at how CBT looks at the links between our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviours, and that we know that what we think affects what we do affects how we feel also affects how we think, and the cycle can go round and round like this. Now, sometimes we might become trapped in some of these cycles, and the cycles might become a vicious cycle, such as the one seen here on the right hand of the screen. What CBT then does is it looks at giving you ways to help to break that cycle through different coping strategies to help to improve your well-being. We also looked at the definition of assertiveness and what this might be, and we decided that actually it's an interpersonal skill that helps to communicate our needs, our opinions, our feelings, and our thoughts or beliefs. So in this section today, we'll be looking at the different types of communication, discussing the difference between these styles and what they might look like, and exploring why we might want to aim for an assertive style. So to start off with, how does communication styles develop? Now, the way that we respond to each other is learned throughout our development and is carried through with us into adulthood. So some theories suggest that through others' reactions to our assertive behaviour, we learn whether or not to repeat it. So if we act assertively as a child, and this is responded to positively, or we get out of that situation what we wanted to, then we're more likely to repeat that. We start to learn that this type of behaviour actually gets us what we want and has a positive reaction, so we're more likely to repeat it. On the other hand, punishment, rejection, or thwarted goals that aren't achieved, following us being assertive as children, means that we'll be less likely to be assertive in the future. So an example of this might be asserting your opinion in the school playground, and then other people laugh at you. And actually, if that happens more than once, what we learn in that situation is that this type of communication actually may lead to social rejection. So we'll be less likely to do that again in the future. Some other theories also suggest that if we hold unhelpful beliefs about being assertive, then this will prevent us from being assertive again in the same situation. For example, if we hold the belief, if I say no, I won't be liked, then we're less likely to say no again in the future. So our communication style is then also really closely linked with our general social style or our preference. So for example, do you tend to be somebody who is more emotionally controlled or somebody who is emotionally expressive? This is also likely to be influenced by our environment growing up and also our cultural norms as well. So you might like to take a moment to pause the slide at this point and have a look at this social styles diagram that we have over here on the right-hand side. This diagram shows that we tend to fall into one of these 4 categories with our communication, with our social style. Take a look at some of these and see which one you tend to most likely fall into. Do you fall into the analytical side, a more driving style of social style, the amiable side, or an expressive side of social style? So when we think about communication, communication can fall into 3 different types. We've got the passive type, the assertive type, and the aggressive type. It's also worth noting here that passive and aggressive styles can sometimes merge to form passive-aggressive styles of communication. So what does the passive style look like? Within the passive style, we have a tendency to always put the needs of others first. We sometimes believe ourselves to be inferior. We might believe that our own needs are not important and therefore dismiss our own rights. We might not express our honest feelings, thoughts, or beliefs, and instead choose to go along with the other person's honest thoughts, feelings, or beliefs. So some common feelings or experiences that somebody who tends to communicate in the passive style may feel. They may experience feelings of low self-esteem or low confidence, and potentially not feeling as good as other people. They may feel not good enough in general, or sometimes feel helpless. They might find that actually it's sometimes difficult to make decisions, and therefore they may feel less able to cope sometimes with life's challenges. So the main belief style that somebody with a more passive style of communication has is the belief that you're okay and I'm not. So that the other person's opinion is more important than your own. Therefore, your needs are more important and my needs are not as important. So some characteristics of passive communication. What might this look like? So if we think in terms of non-verbally, this might look like averting gaze or looking down, covering your mouth with your hand, crossing arms for protection, wringing your hands or fidgeting with your hands a lot, and biting your lip. What might this look like verbally? Well, it might look like somebody who communicates with quite long sentences, using one tone and often staying quite quiet or much quieter in situations. Frequent throat clearing, using a lot of filling in words such as maybe, sort of, to help to fill the gaps in communication. It might look like lots of apologies. I'm so sorry to bother you. I hope you don't mind me asking, but. And also frequent justifications of why you're asking for something. I mean, I wouldn't normally say anything, but those sorts of things. It might also look like self-dismissal as well. So saying to somebody, no, it's not important, don't worry about it doesn't really matter. This would fall into the more passive style of communication. So if we look at this with an example, I want you to think about the idea that you're supposed to be cooking dinner for a friend, but your lecture went on longer than you anticipated, and actually you began to feel quite unwell. So within this example, somebody who's communicating more passively might just push through the feelings of being unwell and make dinner anyway for the friend, because actually you don't want to upset your friend. So again, it's that belief that their needs are more important than your own. So what I want you to do, take a moment here to pause the slides, pause the video, and think about somebody who's communicating in this way. What might they be thinking? What might they be feeling? How might they feel in their body, physically? And what might they do? What might their behavior look like? So take a moment to pause the video here, grab a piece of paper and a pen, and write down in those boxes what this person might be thinking, feeling, and doing. So what this person might be thinking is, I don't want to upset my friend, so I'll just make them dinner tonight. I'll push through and make them dinner anyway. They might be feeling stressed, worried, or annoyed. And in their body, they might be feeling slumped, tense, or just really tired. So then their behavior in this situation when they're having dinner with their friend might look withdrawn at dinner, or it might look subdued. It might also look like avoiding eye contact. And I'm sure that you've thought of lots of other different examples as well. So what might be the advantages then of communicating this way? Might often be praised for being selfless. rarely being blamed for if things go wrong. You might find that other people might protect you or look after you. And actually, it can often avoid or postpone or even hide conflict. So in the short term, passive communication actually acts to reduce anxiety. However, there are some disadvantages to this type of communication style. For example, you might feel a buildup of stress or actually internalized anger. Sometimes other people can make unreasonable demands of you. You might find that you're getting stuck in relationships with other people where actually your needs are continually not being met, which might then lead you to a loss of self-esteem. So then when we come to think about the aggressive style, what might this be? This usually involves a person standing up for their own rights, but sometimes expressing thoughts and feelings in a way which is often unhelpful. Usually doing this by dismissing the rights of other people. So some common feelings or experiences that somebody with an aggressive style of communication might feel is when threatened, the response is often to attack. And this might be verbally as well as physically. And often the advantage in the aggressive style is maintained because it usually involves putting down other people. We might often feel competitive. And it's worth noting that the aggressive style can be overt. So for example, responding to others with outbursts of anger, but it can also be covert. So for example, becoming more passive aggressive. The main belief then that is held within the aggressive style is that I'm okay, but you're not. So my needs are more important than yours. So what might this look like? So some characteristics of non-verbal aggressive communication might be physically intruding into other people's space, getting quite close up to someone's face. It might be also with pointing, fist clenching, or staring at them, striding around impatiently or pacing around, scowling and finding that your jaw is set quite firm. What might this look like verbally is some sarcastic or condescending tone of voice, particularly within the passive aggressive communication style that might come in. Might be often abrupt, fast clipped words and emphasizing the blaming words. It might look like putting other people down with comments such as, "You must be kidding, don't be so stupid." Or it might also look like threatening questions. "Haven't you finished that yet?" It might also look like tutting or sighing at the other person. So if we come back to our example of cooking a friend dinner, even though you're feeling unwell and the lecture went on longer than anticipated, if we're thinking about what an aggressive communicator might do in this situation, you might find that you push through and make dinner anyway, but actually you end up having an argument with your friend over the dinner table. So again, take a moment to pause the video here. With your pen and paper to hand, jot down what a person who has communicated in this aggressive way might be thinking, feeling, both emotionally and in their body, and what might they do? What might their behavior look like? So a person who's communicated in this aggressive way might be thinking, my friend never understands how busy I am. They just don't get it. Why have they still come over for dinner? They should have cancelled. They might feel stressed, annoyed, or angry, frustrated. In their body, they might be feeling palpitations, heart palpitations, might feel really tense or have a headache. This might then lead to being quite argumentative with the friend or snapping at the friend. See whether these answers were similar or different to the ones that you wrote down. So what might this aggressive style look like? Take a moment to watch this video here. In this example, try to notice what SpongeBob is doing that demonstrates that aggressive communication style. And have a think about actually why this might be unhelpful in this situation.
I want you to buy Mrs. Puff.
Wait! Don't tell me! You want me to run down to the store and buy Mrs. Puff something she doesn't need, then you want me to run back here so you can say, "Arr, SpongeBob, and you're spending all me money." And then I'll say, "But Mr. Krabs, I'm only doing what you said." Then you'll say, "We're not talking about this or this, we're talking about this."
So as you can see there, SpongeBob was really raising his voice there and shouting a lot as well, and also using some more sarcastic tone of voice. And as you can see, this was quite unhelpful in that situation because there was definitely a miscommunication between the two of them. So what might be some advantages of this communication style? Usually others might go along with your plans and things tend to go your way. Somebody who's an aggressive communicator might also feel less vulnerable and exposed in those communication situations. They might also feel more in control and actually feel a release of tension. So in that moment, feeling a release of the anger or the anxiety that they're feeling. However, there are some disadvantages to this style. So behavior can create resentment in those around you, particularly more aggressive communication. You might also find that there's difficulty relaxing. Somebody with an aggressive communication style often has unstable relationships and might actually feel inferior or scared in those conversations deep down. After we've communicated in an aggressive way, sometimes we might feel guilt or shame after our actions, especially if it's led to hurting the other person, which can then lead to a decreased self-confidence and self-esteem overall. So let's now think about the assertive style and what this might be. Assertive communication is a way of communicating feelings, thoughts, and beliefs in an honest, open manner, but without violating the rights of yourself and of others. So it's keeping in mind that you have one position, the other person has another, and it's valuing both of those positions. It's knowing that we have rights, but also remembering that other people do too. It might be making requests or complaints in a firm, but in a fair way. An assertive style is about remaining in control and choosing the most appropriate behavior for that situation. It's communication that is respectful towards yourself, but also towards other people. The belief then with this communication style is that you're okay and I'm also okay. There's much more of a balance within this communication style, that actually we both sit equally within this situation. I have needs, you have needs. How can we balance these out? It's having that belief that my needs are important, but your needs are important too. So what might this look like? So non-verbally, this might look like direct eye contact with somebody, but without staring, receptive listening, and having an open body stance with a relaxed jaw, with your arms perhaps down to the side and standing slightly backwards from the person. In terms of verbally, what this might look like, it might be a firm, steady, but relaxed voice. Communicating verbally with sincere and clear language in a way that's not overly loud or quiet. It might be using more cooperative phrases, such as, "What are your thoughts on this?" Again, remembering that in this style, we're thinking about my needs are important, but so are yours. So it's wanting to hear that other person's opinion. It might be using constructive criticism, but without blame. So for example, saying, I feel irritated when you interrupt me. It might also be a willingness to explore other solutions and reaching a compromise in those solutions. So how can we get around this problem? So again, if we come back to our example of cooking a friend dinner, but after you've had a really long lecture and actually you're beginning to feel unwell, take a moment to pause the video here and write down, how might an assertive person communicate in this way? What might assertive communication look like? What might an assertive person be thinking? What might they be feeling, both emotionally and in their body? And how might they be behaving in this situation? What might they do? So an assertive communicator in this situation might be thinking, my friend never understands how busy I am, and they don't get it. So what might this assertive communication style look like with our example? So somebody who's communicating in an assertive way might be thinking, I've had a really busy day and I know that I'm not feeling well. I'll tell them how I'm feeling so that they can understand, and I'm sure that they will. I'd really rather reschedule. They might be feeling calm, but also they might be feeling slightly anxious about communicating this with their friend. Their body might be feeling relaxed, but also tired. So what might they do? They might call their friend to reschedule and explain to them calmly actually how they're feeling. And then they might take the evening for self-care. So here we can see that they're putting their own needs first while also respecting the needs of other people. So here we have a video example of what assertive communication might look like. While watching this video, try to notice that what Andy does despite Miranda's rejection and dismissal. Notice how she starts out slightly more passive, but then becomes more assertive when her voice isn't being heard and her needs aren't being met. Notice how she also continues to put her point across in an assertive way, despite some more aggressive communication from Miranda. So while watching this video, take a moment to write down what you notice and why aggressive communication doesn't work here, but assertive communication does.
Who are you?
My name is Andy Sachs. I recently graduated from Northwestern University.
And what are you doing here?
Well, I think I could do a good job as your assistant. And, yeah, I came to New York to be a journalist and sent letters out everywhere, and then finally got a call from Elias Clark and met with Sherry up at Human Resources, and basically it's this or Auto Universe.
So you don't read Runway?
No?
And before today, you had never heard of me?
No.
And you have no style or sense of fashion?
Well, I think that depends on what you're...
No. That wasn't a question.
I was editor-in-chief of the Daily Northwestern. I also won a national competition for college journalists with my series on the Janitors Union, which exposed the
That's all.
exploitation of... Yeah, okay. You're right. I don't fit in here. I am not skinny or glamorous, and I don't know that much about fashion, but I'm smart. I learn fast, and I will work
All right,
very
I've got the
hard.
exclusive on the Cavalli for Gwyneth. But the problem is, with that huge feathered headdress that she's wearing, she looks like she's working the main stage at the Golden Nugget.
Thank you for your time.
is that sad little person? Are we doing a before and after piece I don't know about?
So what we can see from that video is that Andy continues to put her point across as to how she would fit well into the company and be an asset to the company, despite the responses from Miranda. So when we think about assertive communication, there are some disadvantages. So sometimes communicating in an assertive way can feel quite frightening, and it can be difficult to reshape our beliefs and behaviors that you've held from an early age into this style. There's also no guarantee of outcome. So despite working with the other person and acknowledging that we have different but equal opinions, there's still no guarantee that actually communicating in this way will get what you're looking for. Other people in your life may also not be used to this way of you communicating if this is different to how you usually communicate. However, there are lots of advantages to this way of communicating. So communicating in an assertive way can actually help to build self-esteem and self-respect, knowing that your opinions are just as valid as the other person's. The chances of getting what you want out of life will improve. And you might find as well that resentment for other people doesn't build up. Communicating in this way can also help to improve and strengthen relationships with other people. So to summarize the 3 different types of communication style that we've been through today, when we're looking at the passive communication style, that's where we put other people's needs above our own. When we're looking at the aggressive style, that means to put your needs above other people's. However, when we're communicating in an assertive way, assertive communication means to balance the needs of yourself with the needs of other people. So that brings us to the end of today's video. Next time, we're going to be going through some tips on how you can increase assertiveness. Thank you for listening today.